In every courtroom, there are two kinds of battles. One fought with laws, and one fought with hearts. That morning in Greenfield County, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside. A man stood accused of a crime he didn't commit, and a boy stood ready to do the unthinkable. To prove his father's innocence, not with evidence, but with faith. His name was Noah Carter, 10 years old, small for his age, but with eyes that carried the kind of light adults forget to see. And when he walked into that courtroom, he carried more than hope. He carried a promise. Before the world laughed, before the miracle, there was only a boy, a judge, and a promise whispered through fear and love. This is where faith began to stand taller than justice. If you've ever believed that love can heal what life has broken, stay with us. Watch this story and let your heart remember the kind of faith the world forgets. And if it touches you, share it so another soul might find hope again. Rain lashed against the tall glass windows of the Greenfield County Courthouse, a steady, relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the tension inside. The gray morning light filtered weakly through the storm, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Every seat in the courtroom was filled, reporters clutching notebooks, townsfolk whispering, officers standing rigid near the door. At the front, behind the heavy oak bench, Judge Edward Grant sat with the authority of a man long accustomed to judgment. He was in his early 60s, tall and stern, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed back, the lines on his face etched deep by both wisdom and loss. His eyes, sharp but weary, carried a hint of melancholy that few dared to mention. Before him stood Daniel Carter, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and calloused hands, a quiet accountant who had spent 20 years at the same construction company. Now he stood accused of embezzling the very funds he once managed. His suit hung loosely from his thin frame, and his lips trembled slightly as he glanced toward the empty benches where his family should have been. Only one person remained, his son, Noah Carter, just 8 years old. The prosecutor's voice filled the room, accusing, methodical, rehearsed. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The defendant diverted company funds into his personal account. We request the maximum sentence." Judge Grant's gavel tapped lightly, and silence fell again. He adjusted his glasses, ready to pronounce judgment, when the door at the back creaked open. All heads turned. Standing there was Noah, rain-soaked and small, his brown hair plastered to his forehead, his shoes squeaking with each hesitant step. The bailiff moved to stop him, but Judge Grant raised a hand. The boy's eyes, wide, green, and fearless, met his. "Let him come forward," the judge said quietly. Noah walked straight down the aisle, his reflection shimmering in the wet marble beneath his feet. He stopped at the defense table, then turned toward the bench. His voice, thin but steady, carried through the stunned room. "Your Honor, I know my dad didn't do anything wrong." He took a breath, clutching the hem of his soaked jacket. "If I can help your daughter walk again, will you believe my father is innocent?" A stunned silence gripped the courtroom. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Not the lawyers, not the officers, not even Judge Grant. Somewhere near the back, a reporter dropped his pen. The judge froze, his composure cracking for the first time in years. His gaze darted to the second row, where a young girl sat quietly in a wheelchair, her pale hands resting on her lap. Emma Grant, his daughter. The rain outside thundered louder. The air thickened, pulsing with disbelief. And as Noah stood there, trembling yet defiant, a single impossible question filled the room, like a prayer waiting for an answer. Could a child truly promise a miracle? 3 months earlier, before the rain-soaked courtroom and the whispers of betrayal, Daniel Carter had been a man defined by quiet integrity. At 43, with short brown hair streaked with gray and eyes that always softened when he smiled, he had built a life on numbers, honesty, and devotion. He was the kind of man who fixed broken toys before fixing his own dinner, who still wore his wedding ring long after his wife had fallen ill. But all that stability shattered on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The accusation came suddenly. Graham Wells, Daniel's superior, a polished man with an easy smile and expensive shoes, had framed him. A sum of missing payroll funds had been traced to Daniel's name, neatly forged into the records. The company erupted in scandal. No one cared that Daniel had been the one who first discovered the discrepancies, that he had tried to report them. The evidence had vanished overnight. The same people who once greeted him warmly now looked away when he passed. At home, the silence was worse than the shouting. Sarah, his wife, stood by the kitchen window the night the police came, her face pale and trembling. "Tell me this isn't true," she whispered. "Please, Daniel." He tried to speak, but words failed him. They both knew the truth, but truth without proof was powerless. The officer's boots echoed down the hallway as Noah clung to his father's arm, crying, "He didn't do it." In the cold cell where he now spent his days, Daniel learned that time could stretch endlessly. The smell of rust and damp concrete filled his lungs. At night, he would close his eyes and see Noah's face pressed against the glass during visitation. The boy's voice too small to reach through the static of guilt and despair. "I'll fix this, Dad," Noah had said once, his hands balled into fists. "I'll make them see." Daniel had smiled faintly, though his heart felt broken beyond repair. He had once believed in justice, the kind written in law books and sworn by men like Judge Grant. But the world had proven crueler than the system he trusted. Now, in the dim light of his cell, Daniel whispered into the darkness, "If faith can't save me, maybe my sons will." 2 years before the trial, before the whispers of miracles and impossible promises, Emma Grant had been a whirlwind of laughter and motion. She was 10 then, tall for her age, slender, with auburn hair that danced behind her like ribbons in the wind. Every afternoon, she and the boy from across the street, Noah Carter, would race their bicycles down Maple Street until the sunset blurred their shadows together. Her father, Judge Edward Grant, would watch from the porch, pretending to read the newspaper while secretly timing their races. Those were the days when his laughter still sounded like music. The accident came in autumn. The leaves had just begun to turn gold when a car lost control at an intersection. Emma was on her bike, her laughter echoing down the street 1 second, swallowed by the screech of tires the next. When she woke in the hospital, her legs felt heavy, silent, as though they belonged to someone else. The doctors spoke in careful tones, using words like permanent damage and no chance of recovery. The house grew quiet after that. Judge Grant buried himself in work, his once warm home now echoing with the emptiness of paperwork and late nights. Emma stopped speaking for weeks. She watched the world through her bedroom window, the seasons changing, the children playing, as if life had decided to continue without her. She refused visitors, except for one, the boy who never gave up knocking. Every afternoon, rain or shine, Noah would leave a folded note under the wrought iron gate. Sometimes it was a drawing of them racing again. Sometimes it was a joke so bad it made her snort despite herself. And sometimes it was just a few words. "Still waiting for you." At first, Emma ignored them, But over time, the letters became her favorite secret. She began collecting them in a wooden box by her window. Each note felt like a small thread stitching her back into the world. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire and gold, Emma wheeled herself to the gate. There, beneath the fading light, lay another note, soaked slightly by dew, but still legible. Her lips curved into the first real smile in months as she read the words. "One day we'll race again." The story spread through Greenfield like wildfire. By evening, every cafe, grocery store, and neighborhood porch was buzzing with the same conversation. The boy in the courtroom. Some called it brave, others called it madness. An 8-year-old who claimed he could heal the judge's daughter. It was the kind of story that made people laugh nervously, shake their heads, and whisper, "Poor child. He doesn't understand the world yet." Judge Edward Grant heard the murmurs too. His name appeared in headlines beside phrases like "miracle trial" and "the judge who waits for magic." At his desk that night, beneath the soft hum of his office lamp, he stared at the case file of Daniel Carter, the man accused of embezzlement. But his mind was elsewhere. The words of the boy echoed in his head. "If I can help your daughter walk again." He leaned back in his chair, pressing his fingers against his temples. For 20 years, he had trusted in logic, in the weight of evidence, in what could be proven. Miracles were for children's books, not courtrooms. And yet, the tone of Noah's voice, steady, pure, defiant, had lodged itself like a splinter beneath his calm exterior. From the next room came a soft knock. It was Emma, still in her wheelchair, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Her voice was hesitant, but clear. "Dad, what if he's right?" Grant froze. He turned toward her, his face caught between disbelief and pain. "Emma," he said quietly, "that boy is just holding on to hope. People do strange things when they're desperate." She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her blanket. "But sometimes, hope is the only thing that isn't strange." Grant said nothing. When she left, he sat for a long while staring at a framed photograph on his desk, Emma standing between him and his late wife, both smiling under the golden autumn trees. It was taken a week before the accident. His throat tightened as he brushed the dust from the frame. Unable to focus, he rose and opened the window. The rain had returned, soft but steady. Down on the quiet street, a small figure stood under the lamplight, drenched, motionless. It was Noah, clutching a sheet of paper to his chest. Grant squinted to read the bold, uneven handwriting through the rain. "I'll make her smile again." The judge's breath caught. "That boy," he whispered, voice trembling. "What is he trying to prove?" The first time Noah Carter came to the Grant residence after the trial, the butler hesitated at the door. "The judge isn't home, boy," he said stiffly. But Noah only smiled, lifting a small notebook and a harmonica. "I'm not here for him," he replied. "I'm here for his daughter." And so it began. The quiet ritual of every afternoon. Noah would sit by the garden gate while Emma Grant, in her wheelchair, watched from her window above. At first, she pretended not to notice him. He would sketch clouds in his notebook, hum soft tunes through his harmonica, and tell stories about silly birds that forgot how to fly or sunflowers that refused to face the sun. He never mentioned her legs, never asked about the accident. Instead, he brought laughter to fill the silence that had haunted the Grant household for years. One afternoon, the golden light of dusk poured through the branches, dusting everything with warmth. Noah sat cross-legged on the cobblestone path, drawing two figures racing under the sky. Emma watched, curiosity breaking through her caution. When he finally looked up, he caught her eyes and smiled. "You know," he said gently, "it's not your legs that forgot how to move. It's your heart that forgot how to believe." The words struck her like a sudden breeze, soft, yet impossible to ignore. For the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel like a patient, or a burden, or a tragedy. She felt seen. Tears welled in her eyes. But instead of turning away, she laughed, a quiet, trembling laugh that startled even herself. From his office upstairs, Judge Edward Grant watched through the half-open blinds. His pen froze above the paper. He saw his daughter laughing, truly laughing, her shoulders shaking, her eyes glowing with life he thought had long been extinguished. The sound drifted upward, fragile and bright, carrying something he had forgotten how to feel. He set his pen down and leaned back in silence. Outside, the boy kept playing, the harmonica's tune rising and falling with the evening wind. And for the first time in years, Edward Grant didn't feel like a judge. He felt like a father watching hope return home. Morning came softly to Greenfield, a quiet, golden hour that painted the Grant residence in light. The garden glistened with dew, and for the first time in months, the house felt alive. Through the open window, the sound of laughter drifted faintly, hesitant, like a melody learning to breathe again. Judge Edward Grant, still in his robe, paused by the staircase, frowning slightly. It had been so long since laughter had woken him. Down in the garden, Noah Carter stood beside Emma Grant. She was pale, her hair loose around her shoulders, her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. "Are you ready?" Noah asked quietly, his voice trembling between fear and hope. Emma nodded, her lips pressed together. The air between them was fragile, a thread stretched tight between courage and doubt. Slowly, she placed one foot on the grass. Her knee wobbled, her body shook violently. Noah reached out, steadying her with both hands. "Don't think about the pain," he whispered. "Think about the feeling of wind when we used to race." Emma's breath hitched. The image flickered. Sunlight, bicycle wheels, and laughter chasing down Maple Street. She closed her eyes, drew in a breath, and pressed her other foot down. Her legs trembled, but they held. For a heartbeat, a single breathtaking moment. She stood. From the balcony above, Judge Grant's hand gripped the railing. His eyes widened as the impossible unfolded below him. His daughter, the same girl doctors said would never walk again, was standing. And then, just as suddenly, her knees buckled and she collapsed into Noah's arms. But she wasn't crying. She was laughing, that same wild, radiant laugh that used to echo through his memories. Noah held her gently, whispering, "You did it." Judge Grant sank to his knees, tears spilling freely down his face. He didn't move or call out. He simply wept, quietly, uncontrollably, as the morning light poured over them like a benediction. Later, the doctor would confirm what no one could explain: early signs of nerve response, a miracle of will. But for Edward Grant, the real miracle had already happened. He finally understood. The law can't heal what love already has. 30 days had passed. 30 days that felt both like a lifetime and the brief span of a miracle. The rain that once wept over Greenfield had given way to sunlight. On the morning of the retrial, the courthouse stood quietly beneath a sky washed clean, as if the heavens themselves had been waiting for this moment. Inside, the room was packed once more. Reporters, townsfolk, and lawyers all holding their breath. Judge Edward Grant sat at the bench. the same man who once believed in nothing but the law. Yet today, the gavel in his hand felt heavier, as though it carried the weight of two worlds, justice and something beyond it. The door opened. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. There, framed by the golden light from the hall, Emma Grant entered, not in her wheelchair, but walking. Her steps were slow, uncertain, but real. Beside her walked Noah Carter, his small hand clasped in hers, guiding her like a friend who had never stopped believing. For a moment, the courtroom forgot to breathe. Even the guards lowered their gaze, moved by the sight. Daniel Carter sat at the defense table, his head bowed. When he looked up and saw the girl walking, tears broke free before he could stop them. Across the room, Graham Wells, pale and trembling, looked away, his polished confidence cracking like thin glass. Judge Grant's throat tightened, the room blurred behind the fog of his own tears. He struck the gavel once, not for silence, but for strength. His voice trembled but carried the weight of grace. This court finds Daniel Carter innocent of all charges. Evidence now proves that Mr. Graham Wells falsified the accounts for personal gain. Justice has been served. The crowd erupted. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, and yet the most powerful image was silent. Emma turning toward her father, smiling through tears, and Noah squeezing her hand. Judge Grant stepped down from the bench and stood before them, his eyes glistening. He looked at the boy, the girl, the man once condemned, and whispered, half to himself, the truth was never dead. It was only waiting for faith to wake it. And in that fragile, luminous moment, 4 souls stood together, the wounded, the redeemed, the believer, and the forgiven, bound not by law, but by love. When the gavel fell for the last time, silence lingered, not heavy, but holy. Outside, Greenfield basked in a light so gentle it seemed to forgive every shadow. In the garden of the Grant home, Emma walked slowly beneath the blooming magnolia, Noah's laughter echoing beside her like music made of sunlight. Judge Edward Grant sat quietly by the window, watching them, his daughter whole again, and the boy who had reminded him that belief itself is a form of justice. Somewhere deep inside, he whispered a prayer not to the law, but to love. Because in the end, it was not verdicts or evidence that healed them. It was faith, humble and unseen, that mended what the world had broken.